Hello guys and welcome back to another FPL video. My name is FPL Meerkat and today I'm going to be diving into the midfielder position. This is the third part of my series diving into every single position for the new 2022-23 season, and today I'm going to be looking at the midfielders, the premium midfielders, the mid-price midfielders and the cheap midfielders that I think you should be considering for your team and giving my thoughts on all the data surrounding them. Let's get into it. So here are the premiums. Now, you might be looking at this and thinking, that's not all midfielders. There are only 5 premium midfielders, and I think there are only 5 premium forwards. Well, 6 technically. But I thought I would include both the premium midfielders and the premium forwards in the same table, just to give you guys a look at the stats. And if you're considering the midfielders, it'll be against the attackers, considering we can only have realistically 1 or 2 of the premiums. Potentially 3, but you'll have to really lower the value of the rest of your team. So realistically, you're looking at 2 of the premium options. So to start off, I've given their ranking, by the way, based on all of the premiums here, but I'm only going to be focusing on the midfielders today. So number 1 of the list is obviously Mohamed Salah. He's been proving everyone wrong for the last 4 or 5 years, scoring so many goals, so many assists, getting all the points, being the top scorer in FPL for 3 years in a row, I believe. Maybe De Bruyne beat him 1 year, but he's just getting so many points. You know he's going to be getting points. He's going to be a captain most weeks. Obviously, you could go for someone else to try and be different, but those points, you've really got to pick your moments, because those points from Salah are going to hurt. 0.8 expected goals per 90. He gets so many chances per game. He's expected to score every single game, expected to score 4 in 5, which obviously in FPL terms is huge. He's worth the money pretty much every time, in my opinion. He's the very top in terms of, as far as picks go. 81% percentage minutes. Obviously, he missed a lot due to AFCON, which wasn't due to him being injured or anything. That was just a turn of events. And he's going to be getting a full rest during the World Cup, which is huge, given that most of the other players are going to be getting a full month of playing football for their for their home countries. So I think Salah is just the number 1 pick. Sorry to be boring, but he just is. At number 2, though, 2 and 3 are forwards. So the next best midfielder, I think, is Raheem Sterling. He's now signed for Chelsea, and I think he's a very interesting pick. The only issue I have is his price point is a bit difficult. 10 million, your only other choice is Fernandez, who we'll get onto. And you can obviously downgrade to an 8 million midfielder, but he's hard to upgrade to one of the higher premiums. So if you go for Sterling, you're going to be quite settled on him unless you downgrade to the likes of a Foden or a Saka. But his data looks great. Obviously this is for Man City, and he'll be playing for a Chelsea team who won't create quite as many chances. But I think he's going to be relatively nailed. His team's Chelsea's expected goals per 90 at 1.82 is relatively high, and their fixtures are pretty decent for the start of the season. I think Sterling could be a very good differential pick. I don't think his ownership's going to be that high, but I think he's going to have a lot more minutes than that 62%. He's going to be, I think, Chelsea's top attacking asset, maybe rivaling Havertz. I think he's going to be playing most of the minutes. I think he's a great differential pick, and I think he is actually slightly better than the 5th place person I've got on here, which is Son, who I've put criminally at 5th place. Given his incredible season last season, he was probably the 2nd best player in the game, only second to Salah. But from his expected data, he's just nowhere near his good. He is such a clinical finisher. I think we all know this, that he massively overperforms his data. With expected goals for Spurs at 1.79, they generate a lot less chances than the likes of Liverpool and Man City. But Son is just such a creative asset. He will be getting a lot of the chances for Spurs. But I think that Sterling, Salah, and even Kane at his own club are just better picks based on the data. Obviously, he's such a good finisher that you know he's going to overperform it. So he could be a good pick anyway. But based on the data and based on my own personal feelings, I think Son is third best when it comes to the premium midfielders. I think your money's best spent in other places, but he's a good differential to the likes of Salah if you're really looking to make that different pick. If Salah gets off to a bad start and Son gets off to a blinder against Southampton, you could be on a really good start. And the next midfielder is De Bruyne, who doesn't have very good data for a premium midfielder. I think he's been very overpriced at 12 million. The fact he's more expensive than Haaland, I think, is a joke. I think that Haaland's going to get more minutes than him. Haaland's going to get more goals than him. We all know De Bruyne is a fantastic player. The kind of you can see any compilation of the kind of passes he does. But as an FPL asset, he just doesn't get as many points. He's great for bonus points. But getting those assists for the premium assets, if he gets an assist in the game and a clean sheet, he's getting 6-7 points. That's not really worth it for a 12 million asset when the likes of Salah could score one goal and get 11 points. I just don't think De Bruyne is as good as an FPL asset, so I would be steering clear of him at the beginning of the season, like most seasons for De Bruyne. But we'll wait and see what his coupling up with Haaland does, because he could be racking in 3 or 4 assists a game if Haaland can finish them. And then the last place midfielder on the list is Bruno Fernandez, who didn't show very good potential last season. Obviously, we know Bruno at his full capacity can be a fantastic FPL asset. But in terms of his data and in terms of Man United's expected goals per 90, I just don't think he's worth the money. Man United don't have very good opening fixtures as well. 92% minutes percentage. He was pretty nailed, but now it's a new manager. There might be a risk of rotation. I think he is Man United's best playmaker. But I just think Sterling is a far more exciting asset for the same price, and I think it's worth either upgrading to one of the higher, more expensive premiums, or downgrading to one of the 8 million midfielders and then using your money elsewhere. Speaking of which, here are your mid-priced midfielders, mids. Here are your mid-mids, your mid-priced mids. It's very difficult to pick 10 for this list. I've gone with most of the £8 million midfielders. My scale for this, by the way, is 8.5 million to 7 million. So any 6.5 I've classified as cheap. But yeah, these are what I believe to be the top 10 at the moment, given the most obvious one missing here is Mahrez. I just think that, given my previous rule of I like to only pick players from one team, if there's a lot of players to pick from, I think Foden is the better asset than Mahrez. I think Mahrez is a great asset. He'd probably rank quite well on this list. But I think Foden is a better choice from his team, the same team. And obviously the likes of Sancho, Barnes and Grealish aren't here as well. Sancho's looked incredibly good in pre-season. He's probably someone I put on the list right now, just betting out the previous people. But given on his stats of last year, he didn't quite make it. But I would definitely be considering him. Number one of the list, topping the list, is surprisingly Foden. I was adamant that Diaz was going to top the list, but looking at the stats, I just think it has to be Foden. 0.39 expected goals per 90, 0.29 expected assists per 90. That is phenomenal. That's nearly 0.7 expected goal involvement per 90 minutes. You're expecting him to get a goal and an assist every 3 games, pretty much, in a Man City team that are creating a ton of goals. So yeah, I think he's just he is the best asset. I think now that Sterling and Jesus have both been sold, despite Alvarez and Haaland coming into Man City's side, I think Foden is just going to be such a popular choice in Pep Guardiola's team, just because he's coming into his prime years now. He's proven that he's done it at a young age. He's only getting better and better. He likes to press. He can play in multiple positions. I think he's going to get a lot more minutes this year because of Mahrez and Grealish having... They don't press as much. I see them more as more assets. They do stuff when they're on the ball. Foden is one of those players I just see as hungry to get the ball. So I really like him as an asset. I think he's probably my top pick for the £8 million midfielders. But honestly, any of these £8 million midfielders are a good choice, I believe, bar one. But yeah, number 2 we have, who I thought was going to be number 1, Diaz. I think he's just going to do incredibly well this season. Even though that 56% minutes percentage is surprisingly low, I think I'm more thinking about the very end of the season when he was starting every game. He actually started on the bench for most games when he was at Liverpool. That 56% is based on when he joined the club, how many of the minutes did he play that he could have played, basically, in the Premier League. That isn't including the first half of the season when he wasn't there. I just think he's incredible. Like, he's got the highest expected goals per 90 on the list. He is going to be the successor to Mane at Liverpool. I think he's going to get so many goal involvements in that Liverpool attack that are going to keep producing lots of goals. Obviously, Jota's recently got an injury, so I think his minutes are even more nailed. I think he's a fantastic pick for the team. I think Foden and Diaz are so close in this list, I believe. I think either of them I would have absolutely no problem with. I've even got both in my team currently. I think they are the best 2 £8 million picks. But moving on to the third choice, third ranked midfielder, Bukayo Saka at Arsenal. Obviously had an incredibly good last season at Arsenal. Best fixtures in the league, I believe, for Arsenal. Could get off to an absolute flyer. 89% minutes percentage as well. He's nailed. He's going to play every minute, despite the fact that Arsenal are signing more attackers. He's going to play every time. He is their best attacker. Maybe Jesus can dethrone him, but I believe he is their best attacker. 0.29 expected goals per 90, 0.23 expected assists per 90. Just a huge creative asset for Arsenal. He's scoring and assisting in most of their goals. He's a really solid asset, and certainly he's more nailed on for minutes than Foden or Diaz. So he is a safer pick, but he's less explosive. So I think if you're going for a safer pick, then Saka is your guy. Beating out number 4, Mount, who, again, pretty actually, no. I was going to say pretty nailed on for minutes, but only 69%. There is a lot of rotation in that Chelsea side. I think we're going to see that even more next season. I just don't think Mount is that exciting of a pick, despite the fact his expected goal involvement is higher than Saka's, which I was surprised to see. And obviously, Chelsea have a higher expected goals per 90 than Arsenal did. I just don't think he's that exciting of an asset. It's really strange that his expected goals were that high, because I don't feel like I remember him having that many clear chances. But it's just that minutes percentage that worries me. There was nothing to stop him from playing all the time at Chelsea last season. He didn't have injuries or anything to get in the way. So I just think that he's less nailed on. But even though his stats are slightly higher, I think that slight rotation risk is just not worth the 8 million. I think there are better choices as price bracket. Fifth, we have Kulaszewski, who surprisingly has quite low expected goals per 90 at 0.21. Actually the lowest on the list here, which I was surprised to see. And 75% minutes percentage. So that's probably going to be decreased due to the signing of Richarlison. But relatively good fixtures for Spurs. Some fairly good goal generation of 1.79. Kulaszewski is definitely a player who I see as blanking quite a few game weeks, but then getting a 16-19 pointer. So I think he's definitely going to be a player where you need to pick and choose his moments. When Spurs have maybe a really good streak and you can double up with him and Son or him and Kane, Maybe when the attack line is injured, because we don't really know how Richarlison is going to fit into that team. So he's definitely an avoid for now for me. Number 6, we have Rafinha, who, as of recording this video, not too long ago, he has signed for Barcelona. So I can completely chalk him off the list here. Yeah, I mean, you can have a look at his stats there for fun. I think he'd be the 6th best choice. Wolves have Leeds. Their first game is against Wolves. That's why I said Wolves. Leeds have pretty good fixtures to start off with, but yeah, Rafinha is now signed for Barcelona, so there's no real point talking about him here. 7 is Bowen, who I think is actually a really, really good choice. It's just that 0.5 million more for him does take him down. I think if he was priced at 8 million, I'd probably put him as the 3rd best, given his really good attacking threat and minutes percentage. He's pretty nailed. He's as nailed as they get, along with Saka. He's going to be starting if not every game. It's just the attacking potential from West Ham just isn't great. They definitely overperformed it last season. And even though Bowen is pretty much a part of most of them, I do kind of think he was a tad lucky with a lot of the goals. He did have a lot of breakaway moments. And of course, as an attacker, you make your own chances. But I think that was a very standout season for Bowen. I'll be very surprised if he outperforms that season this season. But I think he's a really solid pick for his minutes, and he will definitely rack in the goals and assists for West Ham. He's probably their best attacker. So, yeah, I just don't think he's worth the 8.5 million. At number 8, we have Madison, who was a fantastic pick at the end of last season. But his stats just aren't great. 0.24 expected goals and 0.21 expected assists. That's 0.45 expected goal involvement. And the Leicester team just isn't that creative, and the fixtures for Leicester just aren't that great. So yeah, I would really just steer clear of Madison for now. I just see I'm unsure as to why he's been priced at 8 million. I think 7.5, and I'd be starting to maybe consider him. But at the same price as Diaz and Foden and Saka, I just don't think he's worth putting in the team, honestly. I think there are better choices at the price point, and I don't think Leicester are going to do too well this season. I just have a hunch, and based on their expected goals, I don't think Madison's going to be getting too many points at the start of the season. I could be completely wrong, but I think he'll be outscored by the other choices, so that's why he's lower down the list. And 9th, we have Zaha, who has really good attacking potential, 0.33 expected goals. You're expecting him to score 1 in every 3. Not great expected data for Palace, though, and some of the toughest fixtures, if not the toughest fixtures out of any of the Premier League teams to start with in the first 5. So his minutes percentage his minutes percentage is good. I wouldn't say he's quite nailed. He's one of those 99%. Like, he's going to start pretty much every game, but he might get rotated once every so often. And I feel like Vieira is a manager who really likes to give the youth a good run out. So I wouldn't be surprised if he gets benched sometimes. But for 7 million, he could be really good value. And again, similar to Kulaszewski, I think he's a player who can really go on hot streaks. So he's definitely a player to jump onto at the right time. But I think at the start of the season, he's a no-goer given how difficult the fixtures are. And 10th, we have Coutinho. I love Philippe Coutinho. He was a real saviour for my team last year. I remember his double figure hauls, especially in the double game week when I captained him. But his data just isn't very good, especially considering the potential you can get from spending just 1 million more from all the 8 million choices. Aston Villa's attacking potential at 1.14 expected goals per 90 just isn't good. It's not good at all. I don't know how much better it's going to be. I feel like he's going to gel more into the team, but I feel like he just isn't going to have the points that the other players are going to have. 80% minutes percentage. He is prone to rotation, as we saw at the end of the season. He was really good for the start, but I feel like he got tired. I feel like he's a player who I mean, we were seeing him coming off very early in games, coming off at the 60, 70 minute. You just don't really want to be picking a player who's only going to be playing 2/3 of the game. Yeah, I just think because there's so many doubts, he's bottom of this list. I think he's an all right pick, but I think there are just so many better options at the price point. And like I mentioned before, Sancho I think is also a great pick. I would actually strike off Rafinha and put Sancho at that number 6 spot. I think, even though his expected data wasn't very good, I think he's looked so good in pre-season. I think we know Sancho can be a fantastic player at his time at Dortmund. So I feel like Sancho could be a really good differential pick. And then we have our cheap midfielders, the 6.5 millions and below. There is a plethora of choices here at this price point. I think it's very important to have at least one of these in our teams. Maybe not necessarily at the cheapest option, but there are so many choices that I think it's important to have at least one of these. And we'll get into the names that I've missed off the list who certainly could show some potential. Number 1 here, we have Martinelli, who I think has been very underpriced at 6 million. I think maybe for now, because he's not completely nailed at Arsenal, he could be worth that 6 million is probably quite fair. But I think if he becomes nailed, he'll be in everyone's teams if he's nailed. At 6 million with that much threat. In an Arsenal team that scored quite a lot of goals with that good fixtures, he's going to be incredibly good. He's even a good player right now, 55% minutes percentage. He's a good player to just have in your team and then have someone on the bench to come on if he doesn't play. Like, he is a really good option at 6 million. I think this is probably the easiest, apart from Salah, this is probably the easiest decision I had to make at my number 1 pick at this price point. But again, he could be rotated out the side. He could just be, Smith Rowe could play instead. I think that's unlikely, but Martinelli just looked really good last season, and I think again he's one of those players who's just only going to get better. At number 2, I've put Van der Beek. Now that's probably quite a weird pick. This is purely out of fantasy. This is purely out of I hope he's going to do this well. He might not even get the minutes to prove himself, but if he is nailed, I think he's a great pick. I think he really suits Ten Hag's style of play. We've seen his time at Ajax, how much threat he can have. And that is his expected data from last year. I believe that is a combination of his time at Man United and at Everton. And obviously he made sub-appearances for basically most of his minutes. But look at that expected data. It's incredibly good. 0.76 expected goals and 0.23 expected assists per 90. Obviously, he's not playing full 90 minutes and he's getting his chances, so his data is going to be very skewed. It's obviously not going to be that high all the time. But I think if he gets a nailed-on position in Ten Hag's side, I think he could be a fantastic asset. So maybe not the best pick to go with right away. And as we've seen in pre-season, he's not actually been that great. But I think given the data there, he's just a fun pick, I think. And at 3rd, I've put Neto, who seems to be in everyone's teams at the moment. And I was desperate to try and find someone to provide a different insight rather than just go with Neto, because Neto seems to be in everyone's teams. But looking at the data, I can see why. The only concern, the major concern I have, is how bad Wolves were last year. They had, of the teams remaining in the Premier League, they had the worst expected goals per 90, 1.03. That is tiny. They're expected to only score a goal per game. So really, you're not going to be getting any double figure hauls from Neto. But we've seen from the time that he's played, he is a very talented footballer. And 0.33 expected goals per 90, 0.30 expected assists. He's clearly got the potential for when he does play. He's definitely Wolves' best attacking asset, and only 5.5 million. That is quite a steal. So I didn't really get the hype at first around Neto when he was going in everyone's teams, but now I'm starting to see it. I think at 5.5 million, if Van der Beek isn't nailed, I think he is probably the best option for a midfielder. But I wouldn't be surprised if he blanks the first couple of weeks, and then everyone's like, "Oh, why did we have so much excitement over Neto? He's just another one of these these cheap midfielders who will get a goal every so often, because that's all you can really expect from this price point." At number 4, we've got Rashford, who has been very, very harshly priced at 6.5 million. But that 36 minutes percentage, you can see why. He's not playing as many games, but under Ten Hag, he might have a resurgence. He might be playing a lot of minutes alongside alongside Sancho. And at 1.51 expected goals per 90 wasn't great for Man United, but it's one of the better ones on the list here. And at that price point, if Rashford could be a really good choice if he becomes nailed in that side. We know Rashford can be a pretty great player, but his form as of late hasn't been that great, which is why he's been priced so cheaply. But I think if he goes back to his best, he could be an amazing asset. There was a reason at one point he was priced 9.5 million. He can be great, but we'll have to wait and see how good he is under Ten Hag's system. Number 5, we have Gordon, who was obviously a great pick at the end of last season, being at 4.5 million. Again, one of those picks who's now been highly priced, quite a bit higher priced, so will have far less value. But Everton's fixtures are pretty great at the start of the season, so if they get off to a good start, he could be a great choice. And that 67% minutes percentage was a lot higher at the end of the season, which implies he's going to be playing a lot more at the start of next season. 1.17 expected goals per 90 for the team. Everton, though, is very low, and losing Richarlison, you can only think that it's going to get worse. They might spring into some form, but I think if Everton are going to be scoring goals, I think Gordon has a very high chance of being part of them. I think also his teammate Gray is a very good choice at that price point. So I think, again, they are two players, just wait and see. I don't think they're good choices at the start. But given their fixtures, they might be. They might be good to jump on early. At number 6, we have Trossard. I really like Trossard as a player. As an FPL asset, he just doesn't quite do it. For some reason, his expected data looks great. I'll tell you what, every time I do a simulation on FIFA career mode, he is always scoring the goals for Brighton. Maybe that's why I have a tendency to him. But, I mean, 0.25 expected goals per 90, 0.17 assists is pretty great for a Brighton side that don't really generate a lot of attacking potential. So, with their new signings, if Brighton score goals, I think Trossard will play a heavy part in them as a Belgian international as well. He's obviously a very good player, and Brighton's fixtures are okay to start the season. I think the 6.5 million midfielders, I definitely like the riskier picks here, just because of their high ceiling over the safer picks, who we are now going to get into. At number 7, we have Walt Prouse, who everybody knows as the very boring pick. But boring's not always bad. 94% minutes percentage. He's going to be playing every game. He's on penalties. He's on free kicks. He's on corners. He's on it. He's on everything. 0.14 expected goals. 0.18 expected assists. Nothing to be amazed by. But he's going to be consistent in racking up this point. 6.5 million is quite a lot just to be paying for basically penalties and free kicks. But he's a decent pick. I think I prefer the riskier picks. But yeah, Walt Prouse is just very, he does the numbers. He's always scoring over 100 points every season. So I feel like if you're a kind of person who wants to pick Walt Prouse, he's going to be in your team for the whole season. Which is not necessarily a bad thing, but that's the only way you're really going to rack up his points. So yeah, he could be a nice pick, but given the difficulty of Southampton's fixtures, I would put Southampton's fixtures. I would personally avoid him for the start of the season. Number 8, we have Saint Maximin. That must look weird to see Ward Prowse above Saint Maximin, given how much more exciting it is to watch Saint Maximin. That's mainly because of the expected goals that Newcastle generated. I know that's given they had a massive resurgence in January, so it's massively skewed by how badly they did at the beginning of the season. I think people forget just how bad Newcastle were at the start of the season. I think it was something like they hadn't got a win in their first 10 games or something. It was crazy how bad they were. And St. Maximin was in that side. So despite all the new signings, he might not necessarily be the best of picks, I believe. He's certainly an explosive asset. He's certainly great to watch. So if you're the kind of person who likes to have fun with FPL by watching the games, he's a great pick just to watch the Newcastle games. He is so he's got a lot of flair. He loves to take players on. He's certainly a fun pick. 83% minutes percentage as well is all right. It's pretty good. He might get rotated from time to time, but he's pretty nailed on. So yeah, he's an interesting pick. At 9th, we have Elise, who, as you can see on the list, has the highest assist expectation. He had a very good end to the 2022-23 season. Bit of a tongue twister that. His expected data is great. It's just his minutes percentage which puts me off. He's not really nailed in that Crystal Palace side, and I don't know when he ever will be, because Crystal Palace just like to rotate their front line. There's not really, apart from Zaha, a lot of their players tend to get rotated. And obviously Gallagher played a lot of games, but he's now gone back to Chelsea. We'll have to see where he ends up. And obviously the difficulty of Crystal Palace's Crystal Palace's opening fixtures would just make me steer clear of him completely for the start of the season. And Visser at number 10 on the list. I like Visser as a player. It's very exciting to see a player who doesn't get game time come off the bench, score a goal, and then just keeps doing it. Very similar to what Smith Rowe was doing. I think he's a fun asset, but only that 36% minutes percentage. He'd have to be nailed to be considered as an option. That'd have to be way high. He's only really starting 1 in 3 games, and for a starting position in our teams, that's not the kind of stats we're going to be looking for. But if Brentford get off to a good start and he's getting some good minutes, he could be a interesting choice. I think he's the worst on the list, but he could be a fun pick. So that is it for the midfielders. I hope you guys enjoyed that video. I'll have one more in this series for the forwards out at some point. I also wanted to address some of the cheap midfielders that I'd missed. My camera actually cut out. So there was Ødegaard, Eze, Fabio Vieira, Bruno Guimaraes, and Ramsey, who I thought were also good options for that cheap price midfielder. And obviously, as I've been filming this video, Christian Eriksen has just signed for Man United, so he could be a fantastic asset as well, depending on what price he comes in. But please let me know your guys' thoughts on which midfielders you're picking for the 2022-23 season. Do you think there are any midfielders that can outscore Salah? What do you think is going to happen in the new season with midfielders? Are you going for 5 midfielders, which was very popular last season? Or are you going to trim back a bit? Are you going to go for maybe 4, maybe even 3? I've even seen a couple drafts with 2 midfielders. What are your guys' thoughts? I'll see you in the next video.